I guess the big news is not really that big of news. The Jets are one of these teams that because you have a lot of New Yorkers who are national radio hosts, they talk about them a lot more than they should be talked about. Do you guys ever notice that? Right? Like, we have Jason Smith. He does the thing with the Jets the way that Boston expatriates do with Boston, where everything always comes back to the Sox, the Celtics, the Bruins, the Patriots, right? Like, anybody from Boston brings it back to Boston. Kellerman is a New Yorker, but he's also like boxing and baseball. So anytime he has an argument, it comes back to boxing and baseball. Greeny is a Mets and a Jets fan, right? So he talks about the Jets way more than anybody should. And here we have Jason Smith, who's like, he'll bring up the Jets when they don't fit in conversation. Like, wait, why did you bring up the Jets there? Because he's a Jets guy. It's okay. Like, that's the game. That's the team that he watches every snap of every game and every preseason and looks at every. The rest of it is just we watch the league. But the big news for the Jets is that they could not find a trade partner for Le'Veon Bell, so they released him. Adam Gase is responding to the perception that he misused Bell. He said simply, "It's irrelevant at this point." I don't know how much more you need to see. Granted, Derrick Henry was fantastic last night. And that's a team built around their ability to run the football, his ability to get tough yards, then play off of play action. And Ryan Tannehill has benefited greatly from it. And they look like a well-oiled machine. Tannehill's athleticism was incredibly apparent. Although, when he tried to do that jump in the end zone, it was pretty hilarious that he fell down. But I want you to look at the teams leading the NFL in rushing yards per game. The Browns. Now, they lost Nick Chubb, but when they're really dynamic is when they have a two-headed monster at running back, right? The Patriots. Well, they don't only have multiple running backs, but they have a quarterback who runs. The Ravens. Same thing with running backs and quarterback that runs. The Vikings. The Packers, who do have Aaron Jones, although they have two other running backs, including A.J. Dillon, they're starting to work into the fold, and a quarterback that can at least move the sticks occasionally. The Cardinals, again, athletic quarterback, and they found a way to create a running game. The Rams, what do the Rams do? Well, Henderson Jr. has become their go-to guy, but they jettisoned Todd Gurley. The Steelers, the Titans, the Niners. Only the Vikings and the Titans have highly paid, featured running backs. Like, go through the list. And I know that the Saints are overpaying because of their running back's versatility, but part of his versatility is that he needs another running back in order to be kind of an every down back. We go through the list. I love Christian McCaffrey, and at the time I liked the contract because Christian McCaffrey doesn't get hurt. And then what'd he do? He got hurt. Dalvin Cook's having an outstanding season, but it should be pointed out that Dalvin Cook's been hurt twice during his young NFL career. And he's banged up, questionable for this weekend. And what'd the Vikings do? Give him a long-term extension. Like, I don't know what the Giants are going to do. I feel bad for them because they have a really good running back who's a really good dude, but he needs to improve on pass pro, needs to improve on some of the other little things that people don't pay enough attention to. They draft him number 2 overall, but I mean, are you really going to pay him Christian McCaffrey money? They're going to, of course they are, because they're going to do what the Cowboys did with Amari Cooper. We overpaid via trade for Amari Cooper, so we're going to overpay in a contract because we don't want to admit that we overpaid for Amari Cooper. Well, it's called doubling down. Right? I mean, it's basically it's splitting aces, splitting aces, and then doubling down on one of the split hands when you don't have 11 showing. It wasn't a good idea to split aces, and it ain't a good idea to double down if you don't have 11 showing. But gosh dang it, we're going to do it. How many times do we have to see this exact same tale before we go like, hey, maybe you shouldn't give a running back long-term contract? Maybe you shouldn't have. What led to the downfall of the Falcons? Well, at least part of it was they overpaid Devontae Freeman, and then he couldn't stay healthy. What led to the Rams? They overpaid Todd Gurley. Then he couldn't stay healthy. I mean, even the Cowboys, and Zeke hasn't been hurt, but by overpaying Zeke, it screwed up the order by which they wanted to redo some of these guys. And so the guy who they had to put on the franchise tag was the quarterback. Now their offensive line is old and beat up. Their defense is dysfunctional. And yeah, they got a really good running back and they got pretty good wide receivers, but their quarterback is hurt, not because of the offensive line, but he doesn't have a long-term contract because of the order by which they did things. What are they? Derrick Henry may be the exception, but even Derrick Henry's like kind of limited, right? And oh yeah, by the way, he's like an X-Men. And we can't compare Derrick Henry to a regular human being, right? He doesn't look like a regular human being. He doesn't run like a regular human being. He is an exception. We did this with Adrian Peterson. Adrian Peterson tore his ACL, came back the next year, was the comeback player of the year and the MVP. And you expect everybody to like these are exceptions, not the rule. And even Derrick Henry wasn't effective when Mariota was the quarterback. He's only really been effective for about the last season and a half. And there's just limitations to it. Can't really throw it to him out of the backfield. You know, he just is what he is. He's a really, Ryan Tannehill can actually throw the ball. They got good enough wide receivers. When are NFL teams going to learn about giving in and acquiescing and giving long-term contracts to these guys? I mean, look, I like the Chargers and their plan. They did almost acquiesce to Melvin Gordon. They just were $3 million per year off. He turned it down and got less, obviously, in Denver. They signed Austin Eckler, a small money deal by comparison, but Eckler's hurt. Right? It's a position where everybody gets hurt. Everybody. So you can sit here and tell me it's not fair. Life's not fair. This is basic business. You're trying to blame Adam Gase for not buying into Le'Veon Bell. Look, the GM who signed the deal, Mike McCagnon, was fired a week after they signed Le'Veon Bell. Everybody was unhappy with it. And if Le'Veon Bell was so good and so held back by Adam Gase, they would have found a trade partner or he'd be gobbled up and signed already. I think he signs, but for a league minimum. He's not the same. Some of that was the year off. Some of it is just where he is in age and all the carries that he's taken. And the only reason that we really care is because he sat out, he was a Steeler, and then he was a Jet, and people want to, they don't like Adam Gase, so they want to use this as fuel. You cannot like Adam Gase and totally understand why he didn't buy into Le'Veon Bell. And I get that you can sit there and go hey, if you factor in the fact that he's going to get another paycheck, for the last 2.5 years, he got $28 million. Right? So the truth is that while he missed a year of salary, I guess he makes it up in getting everything paid to him that was owed to him as he gets cut. On the other hand, what's his next contract going to look like? So yeah, he made 28 over the last 2, including the year that he sat out. But that doesn't mean that he's going to make any more than 35 total over these 3 years. And then in future years, you're talking about the likelihood of a $2 million deal if he can still play.